Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of SuperNova Commencements. I'm your host, Kashi Sehgal, and we have another great show for you today. So let's get started. Let's do first our Career Powered by Data segment, brought to us by our partners at Steppingblocks. Remember, they have 100 million people worth of data and they can analyze basically all the trends that relate to work and your career and your goals. So definitely check them out. Okay, so today we are talking about communications. And so I looked up the stats for PR and communications, and this is what I found. So, the most common educational background is a degree in communications. Yeah, I know, that's surprising. 134,000 people are in the industry between PR and communications in the United States, and the average age is 37, so younger than some of the industries we've been talking about over the last few weeks. 64% female, which is just awesome. I love to see females taking over any category. So that's great. 1% veteran. Top skills, social media, PR, and event management. And the ones that make the most, and I was really interested because the first skill was SMS, and I actually have a text messaging company. So I was happy to see that. Another skill being a spokesperson or being in reputation management. So those are interesting. Most people come from these schools: Boston University, NYU, and UT Austin. So just some quick stats on the industry that we're going to be chatting about today. Now we're ready for our guest. So please wait while I bring her on screen. Everyone, please welcome Kristie Benson to the show.
Hi, Kashi. Thank you for having me.
So great to have you. And students, this is such a treat. Kristie really, really is awesome. She is, and as you can see on her screen, but I'll introduce her. She is the Director of Communications for the High Museum of Art here in Atlanta, which is really one of the premier museums in the country. It's part of this huge arts center called the Woodruff Arts Center, which is nationally renowned. So it's a pretty big deal. And we're just lucky to have her today. So, Kristie, thanks.
Thank you.
Would you please kick us off and let us know where you're from and where you went to school and what did you major in?
Absolutely. So I am Georgia born and I grew up in South DeKalb. I went to Southwest DeKalb High School and I was in one of the most premier marching bands you could think of. I played trumpet, and so really love Atlanta, love Decatur, where it's greater, as I like to say. And I like that because I was born here, but I made a choice to come back after school. So I looked at schools up and down the East Coast. I actually did a HBCU tour, a historically Black college and university tour, probably my junior year of high school. And I took my whole spring break and dedicated it to going up and down the East Coast to look at historically Black colleges. And the last school that we arrived at was Winston-Salem State University. And my English teacher had gone to Winston-Salem State when it was Teachers College, and she raved about it and she loved it. And she told us all that we should be going there. My interest was in Howard University. I was a swimmer in high school as well, and Howard has a swim team. So I wanted to go there for that reason. And they had a communications program, all the things. And when I got to Winston-Salem State, I immediately felt like I was home. And I made the decision to apply, early decision, and got accepted. And the rest is history. So I went to North Carolina not knowing anyone. And now I have so many friends and family from that particular area. So I majored in mass communications. And then I decided after graduation that I wanted to continue my education, and then went to graduate school at American University in Washington, D.C. And I got my master's degree in public communication. So all of my degrees are in communication, and I've had the great fortune of being able to work in this industry my entire career, which has been awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome and unique, I would say. A lot of people jump around, but please tell us how you got from American and just down the street from where I went to college at GW. But please tell me how you got from American to where you are today.
So definitely made a conscious decision, like I said, to come back to Atlanta. I'm the oldest. It's me and my sister, and we're 6 years apart. So she was getting ready to go to school. And I felt like, being the oldest at the time, my father had gotten ill. And I said, well, I want her to have an opportunity to go away and go to school and not be concerned about home. And so as much as I love DC, I wasn't prepared for the struggle because the struggle is real in terms of the cost of living. And most people work several jobs, especially when they're right out of school. And so I said, well, let me go home. I have some great connections there. I had done a couple of internships at DeKalb County government. And I had also worked in hospitality. So upon arrival, I get to Atlanta, and I go straight to Barnacles because someone told me the Barnacles out at Stonecrest was hiring. And in my mind, I knew looking for a job would be a full-time job, and I would need something to kind of take my attention away and kind of ease in any anxiety that I might have during that process. And so I made the decision to go back. I worked at Barnacles for about 8 months before landing my first full-time job at DeKalb County government as a public information officer. And I've had the great fortune of serving a lot of different industries since then, which has led me to this point where I'm the director of communications at the high, like you stated. And I like to say I get to merge personal passions for communicating, personal passions for art, and my professional passion for communicating.
Yeah, that's so nice that you get to merge your passions and your skill sets. I think that's what we're all really ultimately trying to work towards,
right?
Hopefully. So let's start with DeKalb County. You just mentioned it. You were director of communications.
Yes.
You actually did crisis communications for them. Part of your job was crisis communication. You also handled that for Southern Company when you were there.
Right.
What was it like to start out and be handling things like really intense situations and crisis communications? Could you tell students what those, like an example of maybe a situation you had to go through? What was one of the sticky situations, and what were the skill sets that you used to kind of get yourself through it?
So I majored in, like I said, mass communications, and I focused in public communications in graduate school because I very much was interested in political communications. And so when I did my internship for DeKalb County while I was in school, one of the things that I learned very quickly was I loved the speech writing and I loved the press releases, but I really wanted to kind of remain behind the scenes. And I thought at one point that I might even go into public service as a politician, and then very quickly realized that I was better being on the back end of that, helping with the strategy, helping with the messaging. And so I'm at DeKalb County. I'm a public information officer. And basically what a public information officer does is work with the media. And so you might get open records requests, which is a request for information by the media about things that are happening specifically in government environments. And they're asking, well, what's the backstory on this? And it really gives them an opportunity to write what is happening and share that with the public. And so I did a lot of that. And I remember my manager left to go on vacation. It was the first time that she had done so. She was the chief of staff at the time for DeKalb County. And so I was in charge from a communications perspective, and we had a water main break. So that was my first experience with crisis communication. I don't know that I had my mind wrapped around what that would mean, but I very quickly learned that I was very calm in that situation, very organized, which you definitely have to be. And I really learned quickly how you deal with crisis situations, and that has followed me throughout my career. So it wasn't planned, but it is definitely something that I learned quickly, and it has been a part of my career ever since.
So you mentioned writing press releases. You were also press secretary for the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like to be press secretary? We've heard so much about that term, I feel like, lately in the news. But what was your experience like?
Probably not as glamorous as one might think. The Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disability, always long title, was a new state agency. So very much my role there. I didn't start as a press secretary. I started as a communications specialist and then got promoted later to press secretary. But much of that was about communicating what the agency was about and what we were required to do. The state had been sued by the Department of Justice because Georgia at the time had several mental health hospitals, and we were being sued because individuals were being kept in those institutions as opposed to being able to live in communities where they could thrive. And so a part of creating the state agency, which was back in 2009, and that was right at the economic downturn. So it was really one of the only state agencies that was created that year and funded that year. It was really about sharing what we were going to do to rectify that problem that had been presented. And so much of my job was about that, and then educating the public on what the agency did and educating them about the mental health hospitals that Georgia has and how we were going to close each of those hospitals, and just the itinerary that was going to be associated with doing so. So that was the majority of my job during that time, but it was really, really interesting from that perspective.
Yeah. Did you network your way to that career or that job, or how did that come about?
When I was at DeKalb County and I had been promoted to director of communication, I had been asked to present at a public information officers conference. And during that presentation, a lady named Dina Smith seemed to be very impressed with me, and we sparked up a relationship, a conversation. And I think a year later, she contacted me and said, "Hey, Georgia is getting ready to create this new state agency, and I thought about you, and I think you would be really, really great for the communications role." So it was very much about networking and very much about the way that I had presented at that conference, and that she really thought that I was a good fit for the role that they were basically getting ready to open. And so that is exactly how I got the job. I got recruited. I was in the top finalist for the role. I didn't get the top role. The gentleman that ended up being my boss, Tom Wilson, had worked for state agencies before and just had a better understanding of what was required. And I think some of the relationships that you needed to have really to kind of move things forward. But they asked me if I would come on and really support standing up the communications organization. And I did. And I was really proud that they thought enough of me to call me back, even though I wasn't the person that they hired for the role that I was interviewing for.
That's such a nice thing when that happened, that you really get recruited and people come to you and say, "You're the person that we want." That doesn't often happen, but that's going to really only happen through networking. So networking is important, building relationships. Were you daunted by starting a new department or rolling this out? Had you ever done something like that before?
No, I hadn't. And I think you will always be nervous going into any role that you have. I mean, you're going in not really knowing everything that is happening. You know a little bit. And I mean, like anything else, you're kind of courting the people that you're going to work for, and they're courting you to see if it feels like it's a good fit. But nobody goes into a role knowing all, and everybody has to be trained in some capacity because industries are so different and companies are so different, even if they're within the same industry. So I definitely didn't know everything that I was getting into, but I felt like I had a great foundation. And I always say that communications is a transferable skill. It's a skill that you can take anywhere if you know how to write, if you know how to communicate, and really be able to talk to people and find out what it is that they need to know, then it will serve you well. And it's definitely served me well throughout my career.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Okay, so now you're at the High Museum and you actually lead quite a large team. How
Yeah.
did you figure out how to be a manager and how to be a leader, and how are they different?
So I think I was talking to someone about this, thinking back on my career, and I think I have a lot of years left and ahead of me, so that's exciting. But when I think back and I can connect the dots of all the experiences I've had, the band, the Southwest DeKalb Marching Band, was really where I started to learn leadership skills. Like I said, I played trumpet, I was a section leader. I really got a chance to experience a lot with the band. We traveled outside the country to Nice, France. We were able to perform in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. We performed in the 1996 Olympics. And so again, when I think back to the work ethic that was instilled in me during that time, we had a motto that we used to say, and it sticks with me to this day. It's not specific to the band, but one of the things that we say is working hard is most essential. And I just take that with me in everything that I do. So I would say that is where I got my first taste of leadership. And ever since I can remember, in terms of being a career person, I knew I wanted to be in a leadership role and I wanted to be a good leader. And so I think if you seek that out and that is something that you have a desire to do, then I'm not saying you will automatically become a great leader, but I've definitely done a lot of professional development things, I think, to work on myself and to make sure that I'm the type of leader that I want to work for.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Like, explain to me the difference between a good leader and a not so great leader. Or like, is there a difference between managing and leading?
I think it's definitely a difference. And I think leading is very different from managing. Managing just sometimes looks like trying to appease maybe your team members or the organization that you work for. And leading, I think, requires you to make tough decisions and to sometimes deliver tough information to people in a way that they can digest it. And so I definitely believe in leading. And I always seek out opportunities to make sure that I'm honing those skills so that I can be a good leader. And you asked me some things that I've experienced that I would say I would not consider good leadership. I think, I've had the extreme of a leader that was, or a manager rather, that kind of left you to your own devices and on an island by yourself and didn't give much direction. And then I've had the opposite, very extreme of that, where somebody was looking over your shoulder and micromanaging. And I think that you have to be somewhere in the middle. You have to trust people that you've hired to do the jobs that you've hired them for, and for them to be awesome. And I always say, shout out to my entire team. They're all rock stars. And because of that, and because I trust them to do their work, I'm not looking over their shoulder. And I think that we just have a better environment and we get a better work product out of people because we're allowing them to flourish and really do the job that we've hired them to do.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that Kristie just mentioned was trust. And trust is about creating a relationship. I think you hear that every week, that it is about relationships at the end of the day, because building your team really requires you to, like you said, have trust in the fact that they're capable. When they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. And so that's a very fundamental building block. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, been an important part of me growing as a leader. And you definitely have to trust people that you work with.
Yeah. So we kicked off this week, and really this month is with International Women's Day, and it's International Women's Month. Right. Could you talk to me a little bit about what that means to you as a woman, and how have you navigated being a woman in your career? Have you had any challenges?
I have had some fantastic examples of women in my life. And I was asked the question last week, like, well, who inspires you? And the people that inspire me are the people that I see every day, the people that I've grown up with, that I know, people that are dear friends to me, because I've been able to see their journey progress from, let's say, when we were 13 years old to them being grown women and really coming into their own as professionals. And I think that's important. Like, it's great to use celebrities as inspiration, and I'm definitely inspired by celebrities, but I work with probably 90% women at the museum. So I get to see the awesomeness of women every single day. And I just think that is wonderful. So to your question about challenges, I have had, in the 4 jobs that I've been in, I have been managed by women in 2 of those roles, and those experiences were great for me. They were compassionate. They were leaders that allow you to do your job. They definitely knew when to step in and when to provide any assistance that you might have needed. And they were tough. And I think being tough was good because it made me more conscious, more detailed, just more aware of who I was as a professional and how I wanted to grow myself in the various jobs that I've had.
Yeah.
So I love women. Women rock.
Yeah, women are great. We're not biased though at all.
No,
so the communication industry is a strong majority female, like we talked about in the career segment. How do you think that has affected the industry and how it's going to affect where it goes, the communications industry?
I think that women have to be at the table. And, especially in these moments over the last year, it's just been incredibly difficult, I think, for everybody in every industry. No one could have predicted a pandemic. So as much as I've had crisis communication throughout my career, nobody was prepared for that type of crisis. And is what we, called a sustained crisis, because it's been ongoing for so long. Mm-hmm. And I think that it changes and it morphs, and you have to change and morph your communications to accommodate whatever is happening at the moment. And so that is important. And I just, the women that I've experienced and encountered in my professional career have been thoughtful. They have taken their time and really thought about everyone that it might impact. They've been strategic. And I think to have that type of brain power at the table, making decisions for organizations, is incredibly important. And so to be a part of an executive team that is majority women, and to see how that plays out in this role at the high, I think it's been a great experience, and I'm happy that I've had it.
Yeah. So changing gears a little bit, and then we're going to get to student questions because we do have those coming in. What is one question you would ask in a job interview?
So that has changed significantly. I
Okay.
think as I've, grown as a professional. And so the questions that I would have asked early on in my career are definitely not the questions that I ask now. I think culture is extremely important, and doing your research on the culture of an organization and being able to understand what that culture is and what you may be walking into is really important. We spend a lot of time at work, so making sure that your environment merges, with your values and what you want to see in the work that you're doing, so that you walk away from fulfilled, and that if you have to put in 12 or 14 hours, you still know that you're doing work that ultimately satisfies you. So I definitely think culture is one of the things that I would ask in an interview if I had to say one thing.
Sure. What's one of the things you would have asked early on?
Early on, goodness, I don't know that I necessarily came to the table with a lot of questions. And I think that was probably just not being, number one, being afraid, not knowing what was appropriate to ask. And I think if there's a question, first of all, do the research. Try to find the answer yourself first. I think that is extremely important. But then when you get around the table, listen to the things that people are saying. And I think being able to follow up with a question based on something that is said in the interview is going to give you another lens to look through when you're deciding whether this is the right role for you.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Okay, let's switch gears and go over to what some students are asking. Let's start with an easy one, or maybe that's not so easy. Joni wants to know, what was your favorite job?
Now, Joni, here I am. It's my absolute favorite.
Of course.
You know what? All of the roles that I've had have taught me something. And so again, starting at DeKalb County, I was introduced to crisis communication, very quickly learned that that was something that I enjoyed. And I enjoyed kind of thinking through the process of all the people you had to touch and communicate. So that was one of the favorite things about what I did at DeKalb. At DBHTD, I think just being able to learn how you refer to people with developmental disabilities, how you refer to people who are in recovery from substance abuse, those were very different environments, and you really have to respect people and put people first. And so that people first language was something that I enjoyed learning about. At Southern Company Gas, it was absolutely supporting the public relations efforts. Again, I got back into crisis because it's a utility as well. And so there's just an element of crisis that's going to exist when you deal with commodities that are volatile in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really enjoyed just the planning and being strategic. And I just felt very supported in the role that I had at Southern Company Gas. And now at the museum, what I love is having a team that I get to work with day in and day out. They are super talented. Again, they're rock stars at what they do. And I think being able to think so far in advance. So the way that we plan, we're thinking 2 years ahead of where we are now already. And being able to sit with people and think creatively about things that come up and ways that we can solve for problems, I think is a very, very interesting and fun part of my role here.
Yeah. And I've met some of the team, and I can say they are pretty awesome. So
Thank you, Kashi.
yeah, absolutely. So Gregory wants to know, what advice do you have for me regarding a job search strategy right now?
So LinkedIn was not something that was available to me when I started working. LinkedIn, I think, is a great resource, and I think it gives you an opportunity to research people and the careers that they've had. And that's something that you can map out. If you think you know what you want to do, just take a look at some resumes that people have up in terms of their profile, and take inventory of things that you're seeing, because everybody's careers are so different. Some people zigzag to get to where they are. Some people, it's a straight ladder and they stay with one company their entire career. And so I think there's so many ways to approach it, but I would definitely encourage you to do that. I would also encourage you to reach out to people and see if you can talk to them directly. Most people, I find, are generous with their time. You have to be very specific about what you want to know. But I think if you ask for 15 minutes of someone's time, they would be more than happy to sit down with you and just kind of talk through their career and things that they've done. And so it really starts with kind of understanding what you want to do and who you want to be. And I have been fortunate in that I chose communications, I chose public relations, and I knew very early on, coming out of high school, that that's what I wanted to do. It's okay if you don't have that, you're not direct in that, and you don't have necessarily the answers right now. But I think doing the research and following up on the things that you've been able to find is extremely important, and will help you kind of think about how you approach your job search.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I would say is, don't box yourself in. In communication specifically, I think agency is great. I think government is great. I think there are so many industries that you can go into, and all of those industries need communication, which again, I said, is a foundational skill that you can take with you anywhere. So don't be led to think that you have to start a certain way or you have to be in a certain industry in order to be successful.
Totally. You addressed the next question already, but I'll just throw it out there. How do you know you're doing the right thing for your career? Well, I guess kind of. Melissa wants to know.
Hey, Melissa. I think you really have to take inventory of where you are. There have definitely been roles where I felt like it might not have been the best fit for me, and that's okay. But I think you do have to give it a chance, and not immediately make the decision that you don't like it. A part of any industry and any job is really learning what that industry and that role has to offer. And so I don't believe, this is Kristie speaking, that you really get a sense of that until you've kind of reached that 8 month to a year mark. That I feel like you're really kind of confident in what you're doing. You've really learned the organization that you're a part of. And so I've always said to people, try to give it a full year. Try to, seek out opportunities within that role. If you don't like something about your current role, what else can you learn? What can you take on? And who can you talk to understand what you may be able to do to increase what you feel about the role that you're in.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. Sean wants to know, I guess, touching on leadership, how do you create motivation for yourself and for your team?
So I think we talked about this a little bit, or touched on this before we started. I'm a naturally motivated person. Naturally, I just, the glass is always half full. I'm looking at the bright side of things. I'm a natural problem solver. So if someone brings something that they consider to be a problem, my mind automatically kind of switches into, how can we solve for this? What's a creative solution? And so I think that is part of staying motivated. Your perspective, and having a positive perspective, I think, goes a long way, and can really kind of elevate the way that you feel about something, and being able to look on the bright side of something when you have that perspective. And then I think I bring that same energy to my team. even when they may be feeling fatigued, or maybe it's a week that they're just tired. I think they always get from me that I'm excited about the job that we're doing. I'm excited about the work that I'm seeing from them, and that I just think that we're fantastic. And I'm always looking for ways to try to make the things that we do fresh, especially in this moment when everything is virtual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This virtual fatigue, Zoom fatigue, is a real thing for all of us, not just you students, but we're feeling it too.
Yes, it's real. And so, I mean, I've done some research and found, ways to interject variety and difference into something that seems like it would be monotonous and the same thing. And I think that has been helpful.
Kalandra would like to know, do you do certain activities because it's something you think you have to do?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's absolutely a part of the job or the role that you have. And so you do sometimes approach things because you have to do it. And so I'm on the executive team here at the high, and I come into the office a lot, even though we're not requiring our team to come in. They have access, and we are on a rotational schedule, so it definitely looks differently from week to week. But I remember very early on in the pandemic saying to my husband and my family, like, I'm going to go in the office because I believe in being the type of leader that leads by example. And so, if you're asking people or even saying that it's safe to do so, you can't say that from your house. And so I think it's been very important. And I've always been that type of leader. I will get in the trenches with you. Titles make no difference to me. I treat everybody the same way. If someone that's junior sends me an email, I treat it no differently than my boss sending me an email and saying that he needs something. And so I think that's really important. And I think to be a leader, you really do have to lead by example.
Mm-hmm. And that last point also goes to respect.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, respect, trust, these are all very important components of life that can also be applied to leadership. It's not in a silo,
No, not at all.
Yeah. All right. So Darnell wants to know, do you do a lot of writing, and how do you get better at it?
I have done a lot of writing. Now I probably do more brainstorming and kind of helping people to develop their ideas. But writing is just a part of communicating. And so as I'm thinking about messaging, or if someone on my team sends me something to review, I'm always thinking about how can we make the messaging upbeat? How can it be something that when people read it, they feel good kind of walking away from it? And so a lot of the writing that I do is really about kind of thinking strategically about the overarching picture and kind of what we want the end result to be. And so I'm definitely offering feedback based on that perspective.
Yeah. CJ wants to know your opinion of agency life versus brand, and where he should start.
That's going to be a hard question for me because I've never worked at agencies. I think they're fantastic. I've worked with agencies in the roles that I've had. And I think one of the things that I've been told most about agencies is that the people who work there really like the variety that they're getting. So they may have 3 or 4 different clients that they're working for, and they're working on their brand, and they're helping them to elevate that brand, and they're helping them to protect the reputation of the organization. And so when you're having to really think about 3 different organizations, how different they are, I think it just provides some variety. So if you're a person that loves fast pace and variety, I think agency is definitely a place that you should look at. But I feel like there are, again, so many other industries that need communication support. And so think about what it is that you like, and then approach it from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
Kashi, I was thinking about something. I want to go back to the last question about how often do I write. One of the things that I think is important to remember or to even know as a student, as you progress in your career and as you attain more leadership responsibilities, you do get further and further away from the day-to-day tactical work. And there's nothing wrong with that. You have team members to support the organization in the areas that are needed, but sometimes you as the leader are not really doing that everyday, day-to-day task-oriented work. And I think that's something that people should know about leadership. If you're interested in that, then that is a part of being a leader, that you do kind of get further and further away from the day-to-day task, and you really do start to think strategically about the organization overall, and you start to put these pieces together that really helps, I think, the overall communications aspect of an organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Kapana would like to know, when should you listen to others and when should you do your own thing?
Nobody's on an island, Kapana, so all the time I'm listening. And I think that's really important. That's an important part of leadership. I think leaders listen. And there are times when you have to make a decision. And I'm happy that I'm a pretty decisive person. So it doesn't take a lot for me to have very strong feelings about the way in which I think I should go. But I think it is important to listen to people. And I think you can get a different perspective and make a decision to go in a different direction because of that. So I think it's really important to listen all the time.
Mm-hmm. I say that a lot. So we're on the same message.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. Let's see. Here's a good one to end on. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received? This is Corey asking.
Corey, to bloom where you're planted. And that's the thing that I took away. One of our leaders, and I'm not saying that she came up with it, but her name is Connie. And Connie, I remember saying on a panel, I think, and she was asked a question, and she said, oftentimes you come into your career with an ideal of what it should look like. You want to grow, you want to progress, you want to automatically be a leader. And she said, I would say that people should definitely bloom where they're planted. And I thought that was just such great advice, because even in my own career, I have been always, again, looking for leadership opportunities. I think I've stayed with the organizations that I've supported between 3 and 4 years. So I've definitely stayed long enough to really understand the organization and to understand what the organization needs. But I think it is important to get settled into whatever organization you're in and whatever role you're in, to again going back to learning about that organization and how you can maximize your ability to learn in that environment. So I would say bloom where you're planted.
I love that. Okay, so that wraps us up for today. Kristie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kashi.
Yeah, absolutely. And next week, we have another great show, obviously. We will be joined by Katie Kirkpatrick. She is the president and CEO of the Metro Atlanta Chamber. So she's doing lots of big things. Please remember to like us, follow us, find us on the web everywhere, on social everywhere. We are supernovacommence.com and hashtag Supernova Commencements. You all know how to find us. Make sure you're signed up for the mailing list. We send you all kinds of cool things, internships and opportunities and things like that. Kristie, do you have any parting words for our students today?
I just wish you all the best. Follow your intuition and be curious and creative about all that you do. That's what I would say.
That is good advice. Great advice to end on. Great advice to keep your week going. Make sure that you really focus on the opportunities that are presenting themselves. I hope you have a great rest of the week and great beginning to the next week until I see you next time. And remember, it is a blessing to be a blessing. So be kind as you go out and go through your day today, and stay safe and healthy. And we will see you next week. Bye.
All right.